So the mean and median, I think, are both important to report. As I said, a lot of times they're not going to be very different from each other, but sometimes they would be. Any questions about these two? The other measure that we wanted to look at, I'm going to go down to percentiles for this, is down here. And what we want to look at is we also want to look at the quartiles. What the quartiles represent are the breaks in the data where 25% of your people are below a figure and 75% are above that figure. And likewise, we also have a mark where 75% of the people are below that figure and 25% of your sample is above that figure. So in this case, we have two. We have weighted average and two key hinges. I actually don't know what a two key hinge is. It kind of actually sounds dirty, just slightly. So don't worry about what a two key hinge is. If I ask for a quartile, what you're going to want to look at here is weighted averages in either the 25th percentile or the 75th percentile. The 25th percentile is our first quartile. The 75th percentile is our third quartile. If you're wondering what's the second quartile is the 50th, which is also the median. So in this case, what we have here for price, so we have a first quartile of $78,000, $78,100. What this tells us is that, in this case, 25% of our sample of homes sold for less than $78,000. 75% were above $78,000. So that's nice information today. Our 75th percentile here is our third quartile. In this case, it's $112,675. And so what this tells us is that approximately 75% of the houses in our sample sold for less than $112,675. And 25% sold for more than that figure. So this can be also nice information to know in terms of where are these cutoff points. SPSS also does give us the 5th and the 10th percentiles along with the 90th and 95th percentiles. So if you want to know where's the upper 10% or where is the lower 5%, you could also get those figures from there. So they're nice to know, as I said. What they're doing is they're giving us a picture of what our data looks like. We now know where the min and max are. SPSS gives us what the min and max figures are. We now know also where the 25th and 75th percentiles are. We know where the median is. So we know, for example, what is the range to get from being the lowest to being at the 25th percentile, where 25% of the figures are less than that. How much of a gap is there between being in the 25th percentile to the median, to being in the middle? What is the gap between the middle and being in the 75th percentile? And then what's the gap between being at the 75th percentile and being at the top? How much of a spread do we have there? So we have all that. Questions? Everyone feeling okay about this? Okay. So, oh, sorry. The 75th percentile represents that 75% of the people are below that figure and 25% of your observations, or 25% of your sample is above that figure. Any other questions? So our next thing is spread or variation. Now, spread or variation, people will talk about all types of things. They'll talk about range, error quartile range. Those are okay. Range I've always thought is stupid because range is taking your minimum minus your maximum. And so in the John Elway case, that's basically $6 billion, which tells you nothing. If I looked at student data, if I asked what's student GPA information, If I look for the range is 4. Yeah, that there are students with a 4.0 GPA, and while they don't last for very long, every semester occasionally you'll see a student with a 0 GPA. They enjoyed their freshman year by failing all their classes. Oh, it happens. It happens. I've done a freshman advising, and there's some students who are like, did you ever go to class? My favorite of those, like when you see withdraw, FX for a grade, which means that you stopped attending the class but never dropped it, and then like an F, and you're like, you're down to 1 class. You know, and it's like the computer science, computer science 111, which is like how to turn on a computer. I'm like, and you're on Facebook all the time, and you can't pass a class like that shows that you know how to use the internet. I don't know. Yeah, it's like the philosophy of Kierkegaard or something like that. I can understand having problems, but philosophy's fun. So variation spread has a bunch of different measures, but we're really only interested in one. And that one we're interested in is standard deviation. Now, you all haven't heard the lecture that I gave to the 8 o'clock class about what is the goal of statistics. But the goal of statistics is to understand variation. Okay. That's the goal of this class. And so standard deviation is, in a sense, what the goal of this is, to some degree or another. The idea here is that central tendency is always important. We always need to know what is the most likely outcome to occur. So what we may want to know, for example, if you're investing. So you said, I'm going to invest some of my income, and I'm going to put it away for retirement, which is a good idea at your age, because you can invest and have it compound over 40 years, so that by the time you retire, you're rich. But for you all, if you're thinking about investing for retirement at this point, your time frame is 30, 40 years. And so really all that you should be concerned about is what is the central tendency? What is the mean of the investment? So you can look at different stocks and bonds and mutual funds and things like that. And what you should be concerned about is what is the 10-year yield on those things? Okay? Or what's the 20-year yield? Because if you invest, you should invest for the long haul. You're not investing for the next 5, 6 years. You're investing hopefully 40 years down the line when you retire. So the ups and downs of the market, which you know are going to happen, really don't affect you in the long run. They even themselves out. So you're interested in what's that long run trend. So you're interested in central tendency. On the other hand, if your parents are maybe 5 years away from retirement, all of a sudden variation in spread becomes an issue. Because you might have a stock then 1 year doubles in price. Next year decreases by 40%. Over time, that doubling 1 year and going down by 40% the next year probably gives you a yield somewhere around, I don't know, probably 10, 15% on average. So on average, you get about 15% on that one. For you, that would be fine. On the other hand, for your parents who may be investing for 3 years, the probability that they get a 40% decrease 1 year and a 40% the next year is scary. To them, the variation's just too high. What they would be interested in is they would probably take a lower rate of return. They'd be willing maybe to take 7%, but they would take that 7% if they knew it was always between a 5% yield and a 9% yield. That in that case, they're interested in making sure that they don't lose money. Okay? And so they would be interested in finding out something that had a lower spread or standard deviation, or when we talk about